we were just told in the school, like an assembly, that we would all be taken, some of us to, not necessarily all, but most of us had to go to the country, not with our parents and not with our mums or anything, but you had to go with the children, and you would come the next morning and you would you would have a little case of your thing, and just like my mum was told that.
So you were given notice the day before?
Just a few days before.
And
then Mum said, I won't be coming with you. And it was just chaos on the station.
You didn't know where you were going?
Chaos. I mean, you know, the children were crying, babies were crying. Some mums were going with them, but very few. So you were just really, I mean, in a sense, it was like, oh, we're going for a day out.
What year was this? 1939.
It was...
you didn't know where you were going, just to go to the country?
Didn't know anything. Didn't have... You just say goodbye to your mum on the station. And
who were you with, just yourself?
Everyone was crying. Kids, you can imagine. Some kids were terrible. I just thought, oh, we're going to have a day out. I remember thinking...
Yeah.
Because, you know,
when did it?
Dad, don't forget.
Yeah. Do you remember when it like hit you that thought actually this is not just a day out? This was something more.
I mean, we knew that it was war, whatever that was.
Yeah. Yeah.
No idea. But then suddenly someone gave you biscuits and you had these little things they gave you
on the train.
On the train. And then when we got to when some of us. How they divided it, I don't know, perhaps by age, I'm not sure. They said we were going to this place called God Manchester, do you know?
No.
It's a lovely, if ever you're that way, it's near Huntingdon, it's not far from was it Cambridge? Not far from Cambridge. It's on that way. And if you looked up in Google, it'll probably tell you it's a little village, really. And then they deposited us into some school hall there, wherever that was. Mum, of course, had gone.
How many kids were there? Was it quite a few?
A large few.
Yeah.
How they might have divided it a little bit by age. I'm not sure how. And one teacher that I knew quite well and got on with, and apparently she'd known my father. She was sort of hovering near me. And then, of course, you landed in, I suppose it was a school hall or some sort. And then they said we would be divided up, and some of us would go here, there, or everywhere to stay. And I ended up with 3 others and myself. And a teacher took us after we'd been, in some cases, knocking on doors, asking people to take.
Really?
Yeah. So they had no
idea.
Record of who they were or what they were. In most cases, presumably some they did know, because they must have issued notices in God Manchester if people, you take in a child.
So were you with the teacher walking along the streets, knocking on doors?
Yeah, literally knocking on doors.
Wow.
And then they said 4 of us were left with this teacher. And we went into this house, and it was older lady answered the door, and she said, come in. She said the owner of the place was at work. So she took us, it was a warm day, she took us into the garden and got a drink, but it was like, I always remember, water in a cup. I always remember, I never drank water from a cup. Always had a glass, It's
like just, a teacup, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then we sat there and they said you could eat your sandwiches, what got left of them. And she said, he won't be home, the owner won't be home until this evening. This was an afternoon, it was a warm day, very warm day. And so we sat down this wooden little table that was out there, and she brought us this water, and we ate whatever was left of what we'd been given. And then we had, I always remember wasps kept coming out, I don't know, I was scared. And I got up and I didn't like it. I didn't like it there. I think some of the others were crying a bit. And that's when you see that thing I prayed to go with. I went over to the corner and I heard chickens. I thought, oh, I'd like to go where there's chickens. So I said a prayer there, and I prayed, and I said, please, could we go where there's chickens? I don't like it here. Could you get me out of here? And then I went back to the table, and I unfortunately knocked a cup, broke the handle of this thing. She wasn't, the lady, whoever she was, wasn't pleased. And then a teacher, after about half an hour, came in. She said, you can't stay here, it's not suitable. She said, so 2 of you come with me this way and 2 will go that way. We took the other 2, and then they found someone that obviously let them go in. And then we went the other way, and I just got to the top of the pathway of this place, and I saw chickens. And just like, I thought there's chicken, and I went running over, and the teacher said, Mary, come back and say hello to the 2 ladies here. And Miss Allen's, there was 2 sisters, Miss Allen, both maiden, never, do you imagine? And she said, you'll stay here with this little girl, Zena, never met her before. And that's how we first found our home. So the war, it was a quiet country place.
God, Manchester.
But God, man, so, yeah. And they were 2 sisters, one very nice, but it was, Zena kept crying for her mum. This was the girl's name, Zena.
Were those other people you were with, the other children, they were from your school?
Yes.
So you knew them a little bit?
School, we were together, yeah.
They weren't complete strangers to you? No,
they had tried to keep us in that way, because some of the mums had come with their kids, but not very many. And more or less that's how we started. I didn't know Zena, and we just, I don't know how long we actually stayed with them, but I was there for a while, and then one of them had to, unfortunately, go into hospital. She was going to have a serious operation, and I was told that we couldn't stay there for very long. We were there for a little while. I remember beautiful food. I mean, London hadn't seen that food for a long, long time, you know. It was, we had meat of all sorts, turkey. I never had all
chicken.
And that was, I don't know how long actually I stayed there, but it must have been a little while. And then they said my mum was still alive then, and she had been helping elsewhere. No raids really were started in London then. The war was on, and we were getting beaten badly, but you know. And it was, we couldn't go to school all day, they didn't have rooms, so we went either in the morning or the afternoon. And then we really more or less did country dancing and stuff like that. So it was just not very much of, and a lot of the others resented us being there, you know. Well, you can understand that, I suppose.
The other school kids, yeah.
And they kept us separate, virtually. Because people were made to take in. And goodness knows what some of them must have suffered. I mean, I landed with the decent people, but it was still lonely, and Zena kept crying for her mama. And then when I had to move on, then my mother said, you've got to move. We found another place nearby, I guess. But they had a little boy, and he didn't like me being there. And so I got a few punches, and my mother, they could see I wasn't very happy there. So eventually I had to move again, by which time the raids had not started in London at that point, not till the early 40s. So then I was taken to Aston Clinton near Aylesbury, and to my second cousin actually, who was married, but Reg had gone to war in Iraq. And I used to see her in London because she lived next door at one point, but everybody shot out of London if they could. And then I was with her for a while, but again it was getting to know somebody that I didn't know particularly well.
And what age were you then?
I was still 7.
7.
I wasn't 8 till the following October. No, I must have been 8. No, I think I was turned 8 then. And then my mother was, I had to get to know Gladys, who was my second cousin, and it was a pretty lonely experience, really. There was a lot of incidents and things. But, and then my mother told me that she had to go into hospital. No, I didn't know what.
How did you speak to your mum? Through letters?
She'd come down on the bus or the train to visit.
Ah, okay.
It's the only way.
Yeah.
And she obviously wasn't well herself, but I didn't know that, you know. And then came the day when a lot happened with Gladys on different instances, but then my mother told me she had to go to hospital, so I saw her off on the bus to go back to London, and waved to her. You can see her now waving to me, and that's the last I ever saw her.
Wow.
And she hemorrhaged or something went wrong with the operation. So, and I only learned afterwards that the person next bed to her she said, "Oh, don't let me die." She said, "I've got 3 children." Well, she did. Anyway, but so then we were near the aerodrome. We used to walk around this aerodrome in Aston Clinton. And then a lot of things happened within the family, and Gladys's mum and dad were getting worried because raids had started, and then they were scared, so they wanted to come out, and so they plonked themselves on Gladys. Not that she welcomed that, and I think things got hot, you know, what with the war gradually impeding on everybody, and then I had to move again back to Hamilton. I went. The raids were really coming on then. I can remember I was at Hemel when the docks was bombed terribly in London, East End, because Hackney was nearly blasted out of this existence, you know. Place, and Finsbury Park, because Finsbury Park, where eventually I learnt my aunt was going to look after me, who lived in Finsbury Park, North London. Well, we all did at one time. But as for the raids, I used to hear it on the news because you only had wireless, that's all. And the fact that Reg, where I was staying with her husband, was in the RAF. Then came Dunkirk, where we lost virtually most of our army. And Reg, her husband, was coming through, all the troops coming back had to come via where all the Dunkirk lot were coming. And so we had to, and once he was home, things changed in as much that I couldn't stay, that they were going to move on because they had RAF quarters really. And I was plonked with, anyway, so I ended up going to Hemel Hempstead to actually, the one that was looking after me, her mum and dad, it's a bit more complicated really. Eva and Charlie, I always go stay with them for a while. And that didn't really work out very long. So it's all, I was changing all the time, you know. And then I didn't know who was going to look after me. I remember worrying about my two brothers, because they were in orphanage, a very good orphanage, but they got them in a special orphanage. And Peter, the eldest, my oldest brother, hated it. David didn't mind it, though he was only a bit older when he was taken up. But they were taken away from being with me when my father died at 5, you know, and he died tragically.
So Peter didn't like it. What was the other children? He just didn't. He hated the experience. In the orphanage.
I didn't go to the orphanage.
No,
only
your brothers. You said one of them hated it.
I don't know. You can imagine a boys' school. You can.
Yeah.
All types.
Yeah.
And it was quite a good class. They got in by vote because my father at the time was a mechanic on the adding machines in the Bank of England. That's how he got the job. And because of that, certain votes, they must have sponsored orphanages. And this one was like something like rugby, you know, type. And my brother David, who was very close to me, I mean, we had to sleep in the same bed. So I mean, at first he said, I stood there in front of this great big school. I wondered what the heck was going on, you know. So I mean, that was there. I didn't know all their experience, of course.
Of course, yeah.
But then I heard that Auntie Lily I didn't know where I was going to, or where I was going. I had no idea. They said Auntie Lily was going to, my mother's elder sister, who was a widow herself, the son was in the war, in the army. And I suppose she must have consulted with Donald over whether I should go to her, because she had to go to work, scrubbing floor, I mean, hard work. She was a caretaker of the little offices nearby in London. And actually, she was an aunt I never really cared for very much. And I think it was reciprocal, really. But she felt that she was the oldest sister, so I could only assume that.
And where was that?
In Finsbury Park.
In Finsbury Park. Was that?
That was before. You see, all the raids were just beginning to take force.
And you were there in Finsbury Park?
No, I never went back to London. I went to Hemel Hempstead.
Oh, yeah.
Because my aunt, her had come out of London. They were in Barnet. And then they left Barnet. There were some houses going for let in Hemel Hempstead, and they all plonked to Hemel Hempstead, which was a very quiet village type place. Now it's a force to be reckoned with, which they did say then that it was going to be this and that, and one be anyway, because it's got a train right into London. Yeah, so I went there for a while, and then lots of things happened. I can't tell you really. I wasn't very happy there. Went to the junior school at the time. And then my aunt took me back for just a trial sort of period. And the raids were sort of bad.
What was it like witnessing a raid?
A raid? It was fearful. I didn't find that. When you heard the siren go off. And so I only went for a bit, came back until I was in Hemel. I was in Hempstead when the news came that, because the raids were hotting up, you could, every night, Finsbury Park was bombarded, so was Hackney and the docks, all the areas where there was railways, they bombed. And because they didn't always hit there, they hit all surround and not caring where they hit. And my aunt's was we were hearing that the raids were bad. You could almost hear the gunfire from Hempstead, right? And the bombs, and sometimes the planes. The German noise was. Ours was. But theirs was.
So you could tell the difference.
Yeah, you always knew. You could hear them. And so I couldn't stay in that, so I came back to Hemel with my mum's other sister, Dorothy, Audrey and Vera, and my cousins. And, there was a lot of hoo-ha there. And people were in and out of London all the time. Some had to get to work. Some never came back because bombs dropped in the streets everywhere. But eventually, when it did subside a bit, after my aunt, she had a direct hit, so we got the news by telegraph. We didn't have no internet. And she's got a direct hit, a loss. It was, and then we heard her story. And she then had to come out of London. Didn't have anywhere to stay, so we all stayed with this in this small house. 3 in the bed and stuff like that. It was a very. Then eventually, when the raids after I was at one of the schools, one of the little infant schools and stuff. And then eventually went quiet a bit. I went back to London to stay, try to see how I got on with Auntie Lily, because I've never.
What was that like going back? Can you remember?
Well, I don't know. It was when you're there, you don't really. I mean, I've been going in and out of places all the time. I wouldn't say I was used to it. I was quite nervous, I guess. No.
And just witnessing what happened, the aftermath.
Yeah, I went back to London and there was, with my aunt, I had to get used to her. She, with me, I mean, I hadn't lived, we all lived very near one another, but and she always came in to help my mum, and she was a widow, my mum was a widow then, and but I never dreamt I would go with her. I don't think she'd been Audrey. She took to Audrey. You know that you can't. Some people you could take to, some people you can't. And But then, so the raids subsided for a while. Then gradually they started again. Once I was in high school, they started again, and we still went to school and stuff. We had to go in the shelters. Sometimes it was good because it was middle in an exams. We had to stop. We went, so we down in the shelters and stuff like that. But then this one night when it was bad, and as I said, I was sitting in the. Auntie Leah said, "Go out to sleep with her because no other place." We slept on the Oh, that was after, yeah. I slept with her, and so she'd say, it was getting bad. Mary, it's getting bad. The guns, I said, yes, I can hear them. So she said, we better get out. So we got up. Well, I went down in the kitchen, and she was getting a cup of tea and stuff. Because she always had to get up to work early in the morning to go down the road to these offices. So I was just sitting there with a cup of tea, and because no heating, it was very cold. And
what time of year would that be? Winter?
Yeah, it was. It must have been.
Autumn,
she
winter.
was her direct hit. A couple of years before was in the winter, October, and I suppose it must have been winter again then. And I saw the fireplace go up in the air, and I thought, well, that's funny. I'm sitting here, and then suddenly, it was just like, oh, I can't describe to you because all the windows came in, the room was like this, and Aunt Lydia was talking to the woman downstairs at this point, and so she was out of the room, so she was shouting at me, Mary, I said, I can't get out of the room. It was, I mean, it hadn't sort of dissolved, but it moved, you know, and of course then this noise, it was horrendous. And what it was, we didn't know, I mean, we stood there, we didn't know where we had to get out of the house, but it was going to fall down. And the poor air warnings were running backwards and forwards. We opened the door, they said, stay where you are, stay where you are, stay where you are. I always remember. And then they were so busy. And the race was still going on with all this. And it wasn't until the early hours then we heard the all clear go eventually. And it was just the road behind, a landmine. They dropped a landmine. And John, I always remember John Smith, the young lad, him and the whole family worked. Everyone, not all, anyone. So, and of course, meanwhile, all our form people came up to say, where, do you know where it is? Do you know who's been here? I said, no, but we didn't know at that moment. They said, they won't let us near. They said, we wanted to help. Well, of course they couldn't, you know. And this was going on all the time. It wasn't just our road. My grandmother was hit as well. My father's one, she lived a few streets away. His heart hit it, got it bad really. And of course we had to come out again, London.
Back to Hempstead.
Back to and that's and by that time I was in high school, 11 I went to, and then I had to transfer to the Hempstead Grammar, which was another nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. Because, it's like starting a new school. It's, I was in navy and green. They had royal blue and cream, and every teacher had cap and gown. So it was a different ball game to where I've been in now. But Hemel had one bomb, I think. You see, there were places in England that all families were touched by men going to war, and perhaps some women, but not all the countries, apart from when they hit in Coventry and all around them. They hit some of the Liverpool and all that. And because it gave London a little bit of a respite in a sense. But I stood in Hempstead, which I don't know how many miles over, and the sky was lit up with the flames of the fires of the docks when they went for the dark. There was but you sort of, what can I say, it wasn't so bad for us in a sense. it was worse for those I've been until they had to travel, go backwards and forwards to work, still had to go to work. Every morning, even in the worst areas, fires were still being put out by the firemen they must have suffered really. And meanwhile, people were dying that you knew. Like we were at a wedding one time when I was still in London with Donald, and we're going to my next door neighbour's wedding, the girl and her boyfriend from school. He was in a RAF, and we just had that weekend, and they went off on a honeymoon just somewhere locally, and he went off for 1,000 bomb away, never came back. That was their wedding. There were so many different instances, you know, but the horror, the fear, yeah, you couldn't get over it. Every night when the old clear was but the other was a one long sound. But then my aunt was she would have been in the house when it was received a direct hit, but she'd gone up early because she had to go scrub floors and clean up the offices, and she used to get up at 6. The all clear hadn't gone when she got up, and my mother's bits of furniture, because she died subsequently in those few months, were moved into her place for us to have just what they could get in. And they had a dog, Trixie, lovely dog, and it was early, all clear hadn't gone, but she said it was a terrible night, after another. And then she thought I'd make them a cup of tea because people upstairs were in the shelter as well. And she just put the kettle on. The dog was glad to see her because they suffered a lot with the bangs, they didn't like it. And then she said to me, she heard a voice saying, go back. And she always said it was her husband who died just not so long before of TB. And so she suddenly thought, well, perhaps I'll give them another half an hour. They're tired they don't want to be woken up at the moment in the shelter. And so she went back. As soon as she got into the shelter, she was thrown forward and it hit the house. And our dog was buried for 5 days.
But found?
Well, the ARP kept saying, I'm sure I heard a bark. I mean, the whole thing was down, was direct. I think it was only what you call a 500-pounder bomb, but it brought down 5 houses. And if you go to Finchley Park in Evershot Road, there's still that gap. They've made a little park of it where her house was. And it's the only one in the road that got hit. And had she been there, she'd been killed. So it's strange, isn't it?
So the dog, Trixie,
the dog
survived, or
we were crying, thinking that Trixie we thought was dead.
Yeah.
But this IP that we used to, there was people still living in London, of course, all the time. And he said, I thought I heard a barking, and we didn't think anymore. And then until it was coming back down away from London, she'd had enough by then, and of course everything had gone anyway. And she just had a case that she had some of her papers in and things she used to take in the ship. And then she decided to come back to Hemel and to Dorothy. We weren't to move in again, and everyone moved in. Bearing in mind too that my Aunt Dorothy had her mother, 80-year-old mother, up in one bedroom, bedroom. Dorothy herself had rheumatic fever, her heart was bad. years later, there was two of them. One up, one down. Audrey at 12 had to leave school to look after my cousin.
How many people were living in that house?
Auntie Lily and myself. Audrey, 2, 4, but 6.
6. Mum was bedridden.
Yeah, and it was pretty chaotic. To say the least, it was chaotic. And my aunt was travelling every now and again back to the offices to do her work. I don't know how they did it really. People still worked, still went backwards and forwards, irrespective. But of course, then the mood changed. You got eventually the doodlebugs. When they first came over, no one knew what the devil it was. And Vera, one of my cousins, was out on a bike and saw one come over, and she was transfixed and scared of her, and then it stopped, because as soon as it stops travelling, it drops. So, and then the V2, which was the second rocket, that was towards the end of the war. That was the end of the war, but towards the end, Christmas time, I was up there, because we still went in and out visiting. I went and had little friends. They'd invited me to different things. I was about 13, 14. And I wanted to stay, and Mrs. Muirhead, a friend, said I could stay with them. But that night, Christmas, Boxing Day, we were sitting playing something. The raids had gone, the area warning raids. No, they hadn't gone then, because the B2s, you never saw them coming. But the doodlebugs you did, eventually. They got the measure of them eventually. Was able to shoot a lot of them down, people. Not all of them, because they went, you could always remember the noises, And we were sitting there Christmas Eve, and again, suddenly, I was shot down under the settee, and it was horrible, terrible. I thought it was just down the road or something, And Auntie Lee said, I've got to go and find out where that's dropped. And it was 5 miles away, down the Caledonia Road, and it dropped on her. Auntie Lee stood there watching it, and then bring out the kids. There was a children's party on a pub, and all of these children were killed. Auntie Lee came back, she said, right, you're not staying in London now, I'm taking you back. Oh, I was really, I didn't want to go back.
How old were you then, do you think?
I was about 13, 14. Well, I don't know if I was as old as that, maybe. No, I wasn't as old as that. I must have been about 12 or 13, I suppose. And then I had to go back. I kicked up, and it was just as well, because if I'd have stayed where I was staying, Christmas Eve, one of them dropped just behind.
Where you were?
Where I was. And the whole 50 people were killed in one go. Dropped on chimney sweeps. Whole lot.
So where you were living was destroyed?
And they just had all the blast walls falling down, but not the whole thing. Because Mrs. Muirhead, who I was going to stay with, she was saying to her, well, get up, she said. Get up and see what's happening. He said, I'm trying to get up, I'm trying to put the light on, but there's nothing there. Because all the they were all right, because they went back. I mean, if I'd have been, I'd have probably been out somewhere there. So my aunt was right with her. She said to me, I remember saying, you're not my child, I have to take responsibility for my sister and you coming back, which I didn't want to go back, but you sort of, I say you got used to it. I don't think you'd ever get used to it. Not the banging, not the fear. I mean, I went to meet my earlier, when I was still in Huntington when Reg came through Dunkirk, and we were meeting them all from Dunkirk, the station. It was a nightmare really, but I was seemingly looked after. My brothers, I remember when my mother died, I think that was one of the worst moments, because I thought, what's David and Peter going to do? Who's going to tell them? Apparently the headmaster told them. And now, looking back, I think they really went through it more than me, because Peter, the eldest, I mean, he was 10 when my father tragically died, so he must have known all about it. They both knew about the death of my father, yet they never told me. I never found out until he told me when I was 14. I think I've got to tell him how your dad died. And that was, it was such a shock. It must have been, he made a great fight. Well, you know how your dad makes of little
Olive.
And that's my dad, made such a lot of fuss of me. But he was sick himself, so. Anyway, yeah, that's something I didn't know about it until he only told me, because she saw a film where this girl found out how her dad had died and no one had told her. And my brothers both knew. My brother, of course, 10, he knew. Peter, David found by press cutting in a drawer. But he never told me, neither of them never mentioned his death until he told me at 40.
Did you ever ask them why they didn't
I just
share?
assumed he was.
Why your brothers didn't share that?
I was told that you'd laugh really, that he tripped over an anchor and hit his head or something. Something stupid. But he died. We lived in Hanning Road, where actually we were blasted out just a few years later by the landmine that dropped. And because my mum must have had to, she couldn't stay in that flat because, well, he didn't die in that flat. He went to my grandma's at Gast. They wouldn't bury him in consecrated ground at the time. But his sister, one of his sisters, asked for a post-mortem. And only then did they do it, and then they found he had a tumour in the brain, which obviously they didn't know about. So it was tragic. The years were tragic, really. But it's what it is for me, the noise, the banging. I mean, people still went like you would. You'd still carry on, irrespective of how it was. I mean, we were walking up a road just messing about and laughing. The raid had gone, and the woman said, "Get into somewhere shelter. You've got nothing on your heads. There's shrapnel falling all over the place."
Because it was the norm. We
didn't think about it.
Sure.
Didn't realise what shrapnel could do.
No.
And all the. So in a way, our youth shielded us in many ways.
Yeah.
But for so many, it was terrible. And I think when one of our colleagues died on that night, I think all his family, him as well. Young kid in our class, then it
hits home.
Actually,
hit home, yeah.
But it was, and there were so many stories, all the time of children. Many of them were molested and they didn't know. They had no records of who these children were going to. Of course, were totally unprepared.
The desperation, I guess.
Yeah, and you had to. When Jeff, apparently, he was evacuated, I didn't know him then, of course, but he said when he went to Northampton, and as the train pulled in, there was a notice on the station, "Go home, Londoners, we don't want you." He said, that's what was. and when they tried to take me away from the grammar school, when the headmaster, because I come from London and raised into this school, cap and gown, French, I didn't even bother to listen. And I was crying until he said, you can't stay there. She said, I'm going to see the headmaster. She went, and all he offered her was, he said, well, I understand what it was. She said, you've not even heard of one bomb drop here, she said. And he said, and she said, these we've endured night after night, no sleep and then he said, well, she can go back to the elementary school. She said, no, my aunt don't tell us. She said, she's past that scholarship. You've got to somehow find a way of helping her. After that, they did. They sheared off of me a bit, and actually the French, which was causing me, I got quite good at it. She was very good. So I was there a year, and then back.
Did you see that quite a lot in all the schools that you went to? Was there always that conflict between the country kids and the city? Just because they couldn't understand.
No. Until it either went, when it went eventually to Liverpool, Coventry and all them, then they understood.
Because it was real.
They were sort of, but I guess up in Scotland they wouldn't have known much.
So the kids from your school, they were shipped all over the country?
Yeah. And of course, so some were unhappy. You just imagine, I was only 7 here. And it was a lot of stories. There was good stories as well.
Of course.
But I don't know how many were. Because this little boy where I went the second time, he was punching and you couldn't touch him. You couldn't hit back. Who was going to defend you? Nobody. So the fear, even, when I think of Ukraine, and that's when they got the enemy on their land, it must be terrible. And what follows, the reward of the soldiers is to rape the women, and that's what happened. And that's what some of them are having to do. They're not reporting that, but it's going to be there. If they find bodies everywhere here and there, then the rest follow.
So what can you remember? What did it feel like on when the war ended? Where were you?
When the war ended, I was.
Were you in London?
For VE night, I happened to have a friend to take me for a holiday in Somerset, next door, and I was in Somerset when they actually came through the war. And then it was going to be VE night, so we came all the way back from Somerset to London. I was then about 14, and joined in the celebration. My aunt, meanwhile, found a flat near Highbury, not far from the Arsenal ground, actually. And that's where I came back to, and I was there for VE night. VE night we came back, and then VE night was in London. And then VJ night, which is Victoria Japan, so months later, that's when we came back from Somerset. So we were travelling in and out, probably ended up in London.
It must have felt quite a release from everyone.
Oh, I mean,
all the pain.
Every man was in uniform. You never saw. If they saw a young man in civvies, he'd get called over. He'd get called at. Why aren't you in uniform? Why aren't? And irrespective of whether they had a bad heart, bad lungs, people were very cruel because they'd been hurt. They seemed to hurt others. You know?
Yeah.
And that was. It was in and out all the time of London. You came back when it lulled, you went out when it got bad, or if you were hit. I mean, we laid on the floor for a year. Didn't have a bed, I think everything had gone. Until his stuff was all gone.
So then you moved to Highbury with your auntie?
When I came back eventually and went to Highbury High School, yeah. Although first I went there, yeah, then I went to Hemel, then I came back to Highbury again. And I was in with all the friends in one form when I left London. When I went to Hemel, I was a grammar, I was terrible. And I couldn't do any much, I never take much notice or anything, you know. And I came back and I was much better. I got on quite well. And I had to do their yearly exams even though I hadn't taken it at Highbury. And I came out near the top most of the time. I mean, I wasn't that good, but for then I was. And yeah, so it was, but it was, yeah, in and out. Yeah, that's all I could say. In and out of London.
It sounds like it.
You travel, you'd go. I mean, I suppose as being a young person, you didn't understand quite so much. Although I used to listen avidly to the news. And Donald, of course, until his son was. I mean, he was stationed near Gosport when all that went up, you know, down at Portsmouth and that. And I know he rushed into a cinema to get they said there's all their money in the bank. He got all the money out for him before it went up. So he was in and out. Because I didn't see him until he was demobbed. And really, I only knew him as my cousin. He was a young lad when I saw him go off. When he came back, he was a man, you know. So it was a funny experience.
Incredible story.
But fear and was always there. You couldn't know. And it's worse for the grown-ups, really. You know, we didn't really understand it all. We knew it was cruel and bad and horrible and fearful.
Sure.
But we were young.
Yeah.
And now I can see a room full of people like yourself sitting there like that. And they were going in the next morning. All of them never held a gun. Didn't know what anything meant. Some of them came back, some didn't. Some wounded. 18. What do you know, 18? A gun.
Nothing.
I think the youngsters in Ukraine, terrible.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we think we've got problems here and now, and we have, but for them, for anyone in a war,
I will never understand. It's something that.
And of course, the young were the first to go.
Yes, of course.
And if they couldn't go because of something wrong, then they went through it too. Why aren't you So, my son's there, my husband, why is yours? You sort of thing.
So those kids that you were evacuated with, did you ever see them again?
No, I never knew what. I never knew her before.
No.
I just said,
you were just there for a few weeks.
I don't know which school she'd come from, and
you were on your own.
We were just together for a while. No, I never found out what happened to her. Because I suppose because my mum died, and then that link was, Auntie Lynn's link was different to my mother's. And it was a hard time. And actually I remember seeing a glimpse of a sailor with a girlfriend, I think she must have been. And I must have been about 16. And I thought, didn't know there was a sailor living down Evershire Road, because it must have been Jeff. I've seen one sailor. I didn't know who he was.
That was the beginning.
And yet we were both at the same street party too. Yeah, we.